In a previous video, we introduced you to the pen tool. Just to recap, it essentially creates anchor points and segments or lines between each of those anchor points to help you create more dynamic illustrations. In this example, it is creating straight lines between each of the anchor points. In addition to creating straight lines, we can also create curves. But in this video, we're not going to cover the basics of the pen tool. What we're going to do is talk to you about how to be more efficient when you're using the pen tool so that you don't have to go back later and add anchor points and delete anchor points and convert them from corner to curve, or kind of mess with them using the direct selection tool. Now, it's not that those things are wrong, but sometimes you just don't have enough time, or you use the pen tool enough that you just need to be more efficient. So the first technique we want to show you is right now I'm done with my particular illustration, but notice that it's still, since I haven't closed this shape, it still thinks I'm trying to draw. Now I could hit escape, or I could actually close the shape, or what I can do is hold the Command or Control key on the keyboard, and it's going to temporarily change my tool to the direct selection tool. Then I can click on the artboard, and it's going to get me out of that illustration, and when I let go of Command or Control, it's going to turn my tool back to the pen tool. So that's an easy way to get out of it without having to always use escape key or switch to different tools or whatnot. So let's see another handy option that you can do here. If you want to create straight lines, if I click on this anchor point, I can create any direction line I want to if I'm not holding down any modifier keys. If I hold the Shift key though, it'll constrain it so that I can create only straight lines or perfect angles, so to speak. So I'm going to move over here while holding Shift key and click on this part to create my second anchor. And again, I'm still holding Shift and I'm creating perfect straight lines. And again, to get out of the illustration, I'm going to hold Command or Control and click on the artboard. So let's talk about how to create curves. Again, just to refresh, to create a curve, you're going to click and drag in the direction you want the curve to go. So I want this curve to move up, so I'll click and drag my first anchor point up. Notice that I can also hold Shift here, and it's going to make my handles perfectly straight. So I'll move it about there. You don't want to create it too tall or too short, or else it'll create dramatic curves, so to speak. We want to go about as high up as we think we want our curve to go. So we're going to click on the second anchor point and bring it down so that it pulls that curve up. Again, we're going to Command or Control and click on the artboard to get out of that illustration. So how do we then create this curvy line? Well, you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to hold the Shift key to make a perfectly straight handle, click and drag down, and then you can turn it every which way if you wanted to actually mimic the curve we have here. If you don't have this practice drawing, you would have one either with your textbook, or maybe you can create one on your own, or you can just try to practice and follow along by eyeballing it. So again, I'm going to click and drag up, click and drag down, up, and down. Command or Control click to get out of that illustration. So here's where you can really become more efficient. What happens when you want to create curves, but you want all of the curves to go in the exact same direction? Well, when you first create the first one, again, always with the first one, you're going to move your mouse in the direction you want the curve to go. For the next one, we're going to click and drag down, because then that top handle is going to pull that curve up. Now the problem is this handle down here is going to mean that when I try to click on this anchor, it's going to create a curve that's down here, because this particular handle controls this second curve. So essentially what I need is this handle to move up here so I can create another top curve. To do that, I'm going to hold Alt, and it's going to temporarily change my pen tool to a Convert Anchor Point tool, and I'm going to click and drag on that handle and move it up. So now I can click and drag down and Alt and drag that lower handle back up, click and drag down, Alt and drag that lower handle back up, click and drag down, Alt drag up, click and drag down. And notice when I say click and drag down, I've already released the Alt, and the only time I hold Alt is when I want to move this particular lower handle. So Command or Control click to get out of that illustration. Now the last thing we want to cover is how to create curves and straight lines in the same illustration. Again, we're going to start out with the curve, so we're going to click and drag up, click and drag down, and it's the same concept as before, except for this time you want to get rid of this handle to create a straight line. You don't want to move it any which way you need to. So in order to do that, hold Alt and go back to the anchor you just created and click on it, and it's going to get rid of that unused handle. So then we can hold Shift to create a straight line from the last anchor to this one, and now Alt drag to drag a new handle out so we can go from straight line to curve. So click and drag. Now Alt click to get rid of that handle, click to create a straight line, and then Alt drag to drag a new handle out so we can create a curve. So again, Command or Control click on the artboard to get out of the illustration. So those are ways to be a little bit more efficient with a pen tool so that as you're drawing you can do things on the fly and get what you need. Now what I highly recommend is that you go online and you find pictures or illustrations that you want to try to mimic so you can practice the pen tool. If I turn all of these off, I went and found a picture of this awesome penguin. He has some pretty simple curves, but he also has some straight lines here and here in this part of his eyes. That's going to allow me to practice those curves and those straight lines. So I put his picture on the artboard and I locked that layer, and what I could have done is I could have clicked on this particular picture and go to transparency and reduce the transparency of that photo. Let's do it. There you go. So then I can still see it, but it's a little bit faded, so I'll lock that so I don't change it. And then what you do is you just go through each part and you use the pen tool. So here's the feet, and then there's a layer that I did that are feet details. So this is just allowing a person to practice their particular pen tool skills on something that's already created. So again, we do the underarms, then we added the black body, then the white body, gray fur details, white eyes, black eyes, and then the beak. So again, this is not an illustration I created from scratch, but I highly recommend that you do this. Find a picture, maybe an icon of some sort. What I did is I went into Google image search and I typed in penguin vector just because I like penguins, and I found this guy right here. All these other ones, they would have been good to work with, but they didn't have as many straight lines as he had in here, and wanted to be able to practice both. So make sure that you try this and you practice any which way you can. And I know it's going to be frustrating at the beginning, but I promise you a couple of times practicing with these and you're going to love the pen tool and you'll never want to go back.